Tries to have a brown nose comment. See how many people got that one.
Alrighty, so we should be live. So hello and welcome to Tabletop Cafe, presented by Tabletop Journeys. You can think of us as a roadside diner along your journey, your tabletop journey, serving up bite-sized chunks of gaming goodness. My name is Michael, and I'm of course one of your co-hosts. Joining me as always is Chris.
Hello, everybody. We're back.
We are back. And join us again,
Yay.
kind of our unofficial third at this point is Lewanika. Lewanika, say hello to everyone.
Hey, everybody. I'm Lewanika, one of the co-hosts of the main Friday show and one of the GMs for our actual play here at Tabletop Journeys. Friend of Michael and Chris for close to 5 years now going on, but no end in sight because I don't know about anybody else, but I'm planning to be rolling dice till the very last and at least 10 minutes after I got at least one death save in me.
Yeah. I had the fortune of being on a podcast once where we talked about how do you think you're going to go and what would you want, how would you like that to be? And I think at the time I said, I'm actually running a game and it's like the big boss battle at the final of a campaign. And I stand up to roll the D20 to see what happens. And then that's the last thing I do is toss that D20 and I never see what happens to it.
Oh, like the Sopranos just kind of
fade to black
with the theme music rolling?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
I mean, that probably would be terrible for everyone else at the table, but for me, pretty good way to go. Going out, doing what I love, right? So speaking of doing what we love, talking to folks, talking to each other, just kind of sharing our thoughts about gaming and hopefully somewhere along the conversation, something we say resonates with someone else is what we like to do. That's what this show is about. And tonight we actually are going to talk a little bit about safety tools. And this is a conversation. It's come up many times in many different places. I know I've talked about it in other places. Chris has, Lewanika, I'm sure you have as well.
Yes.
But again, I think it's important to sometimes reiterate and revisit topics that we've already visited, but we want to try to maybe approach it in a slightly different avenue. So we're only going to talk briefly about kind of what they are and maybe spend a little bit more time talking about how you can actually successfully implement them at your table, maybe share some examples of times that we did or did not do them well. I think, Chris, you actually were the one that kind of came up with this idea based on some recent LARPing that you were doing, and there was some like sensitive material that was being discussed or was part of that game, and it got your mind turning on the thoughts of safety tools in like different types of games, like home games, con games, LARPs versus RPGs, that kind of thing. So I want to just kind of turn it over to you and kind of set things up however you'd like, and we'll just see where the conversation takes us.
Okay, perfect. I did, in the last year, basically started doing a full-scale LARP. I mean, for years I avoided them. I should say avoided them. I was nervous to get out of my own bubble in a way. And I had a friend that just talked me into it. And I went up there like, all right, I got nothing to do. I'll go up and entertain you guys. And of course, once I got out of my bubble, I fell in love with it. So, once a month I'm traveling somewhere to do one of these LARPs, and they have some really good safety tools they put into it. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to talk about them.
Sure.
I think let's just start right off the bat. I think probably your biggest safety tool is your session zero.
Yep.
Right there, you can talk about exactly what the content of the game is going to be, the rating. You can talk about where the setting's going to be. You can kind of figure out characters. I think it's important in that session zero also to make sure that we are looking at what types of characters people are comfortable playing. I know people who are not very comfortable playing the face of the party. So I say to them, all right, well, maybe pick the barbarian or pick the cleric, or if you want to try being the face of the party, understand you don't have to be the best at talking. I'm fine as a DM if you just roll the die and we go, cool. You talk your way through it.
Yep. That's why we have dice and character sheets.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I've said it before. I don't have an 18 intelligence. If I did, I don't know, I might be solving mysteries of the universe or something like that. And I've said before, it's hard for me to even contemplate something like that. How smart somebody has to be. But it's easy for me to understand how my character would do it.
Mm-hmm.
He is that smart. So what are some of the other things you guys might do in session 0 to help set up the safety tools.
Lewanika?
Yeah, so for me, I think the setting up the safety tools does depend on the venue, right? You know, there's physical safety, making sure things don't fall on you while you record, that type of thing.
I was just trying to move my light, and that was sorry.
That's okay. That's usually me doing stuff like that. See, almost every episode, Josh is running, and I'm messing around with something right as we get started. No, but on a serious note, I think there's so many different things that can go into it. But if we're talking about safety tools, I think the number one thing is kind of just setting the stage. That can and does encompass what Chris is bringing up, like what we're here to do, what type of game we're going to play, what type of characters you can or are willing to play. But it also gets into, the other elements of, what are the themes we're going to get into? What is the tone of the event we're partaking in? If you say we're doing a horror game, there's all kinds of different horror. There's horror like Eddie Murphy's Vampire in Brooklyn, and then there's horror like the Cenobites in Hellraiser. Those are two vastly different horrors, and neither of those are anything even close to what you would find in, say, Saw. And so, or The Hills Have Eyes, right? They're very different things. And, Ash versus the Evil Dead or something like that. So, kind of being sure you're able to be specific in your descriptions as a GM or storyteller so that the word you use means what you want it to mean, not something that somebody else brings to it. So, there's a lot of technique that goes into that. And I think one of the greatest things is to use movies, television, pop media as an example. If I say I'm doing a pirate movie, I could say I'm doing a pirate movie like Pirates of the Caribbean. So they know there's going to be humor, there's going to be action, there's going to be adventure, some mystery, some puzzles, but generally fairly D&D standard, to be honest. But if I say I'm going to do something like the 1950s Sinbad, it may have a little more of that sort of sorcery element to it. But I could also take it to whole other elements like Black Sail or some of the other, some of the British UK event series that they've done where, 10 episode series where Blackbeard and so on and so forth, where it's a little bit grittier, it's a little bit more into the politics, or it's a little bit more into the nuts and bolts. There's different ways to do that. So being sure that you're giving touchstones to folks so they, oh, I have seen that. Now I know what you're going for versus, oh, it's a pirate thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of
Ice Pirates is very different than something else. So you got to be clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually played Mork Borg for the first time last Origins, and I think I remember talking about it then. It was my fault, but I kind of went into it thinking it was going to be a Pirates of the Caribbean thing. Like I was going to be, making weird jokes and, where's the rum gone? That was not the game we played. It didn't bother me, but there was some cognitive dissonance that I was like, oh, I went in thinking this and it turned out to be that. And I could see how someone else that might be triggering to them. It was off-putting for me, but it wasn't triggering. And I was able to navigate it. But mostly I was disappointed because I really wanted to play more of a Pirates of the Caribbean kind of game. So this is all the way around to say this, again, as someone who runs a small convention, I am very adamant that your descriptions, when you write what your game is going to be about, should include a lot of different things, including the tone and style of the game along those lines. So that is, again, if we're jumping out of like our home games into like a convention, if you're submitting a game to a con, include a lot of information. Usually they have like a short description and a long description. So you have room if you want to do your snappy elevator pitch, movie poster, like get people excited, sure. But somewhere it needs to be, this is the type of tone in game. It's going to be PvP. It's going to be body horror. It's going to be this, that, or the other, because it's very important. But back to your original question. So I'm a big fan of lines and veils. Again, if people are not familiar, lines are things that will not happen in the game, period. There's a line that will not be crossed. And veils are things that can happen, but we're not going to really spend any like screen time on them. We're not going to spend any table time really examining them. Like a line for me is sexual assault. just not something I'm interested in dealing with in a game. I don't want players to do it. I don't want it to happen to characters. It's just not anything I'm interested in ever having at my table. But like consensual sexual relations between two adult characters, sure, but that's a veil where you go into a door, the door closes, and then we just cut to the next morning. Like, we're not going to go into the bedroom with our characters. We're not going to roll charisma or stamina checks. We're not going to like tell me what you no, we assume everyone had a great time, and then we come back out of the room the next day. And so that's like the difference between the line and the veil. Now, one thing I have seen come up in other conversations and other forums is the conversation about lines and veils can be uncomfortable. You know, if you are someone that has had a history, something has happened to you, and now you don't want X, Y, or Z, just saying that can be an issue. So there are ways to have those conversations, like anonymously. There are forms you can get. You can like handouts where people mark things, and you collect them, you know, just in a pile so you don't know whose is whose. You can do Google Forms where you can like check boxes. And again, there might be a way if someone knows, I don't know how to figure out who actually checked what. There's a new product I saw recently. It's like a deck of cards where it's got some of the common things on them that people might find troublesome. And you just like take out the cards you want, you throw them in a pile, everyone else does the same. And then all the cards get shuffled together, kind of like, you know, Cards Against Humanity. You don't know who did what. And then you can go through them. Whatever way works for you and your table is really all that matters. And if it's people you've been playing with for 20 years, then you probably have a pretty good idea, but it's still a good idea to just, you know, check in. These are your friends. You wouldn't want to piss them off or hurt them. So, you know, every now and then just check in like, hey, we're all doing good. So lines and veils, and then the X card or some version of, hey, you know, I didn't think that it would be a concern, but turns out now that we're here, it actually kind of is. So I need a way to say time out in the moment without it becoming a big issue at the table. And the X card is basically like, hey, what's happening right now is uncomfortable. We're just going to fade to black, move on, cut scene, whatever. No one's going to say, hey, Michael, why was the scene we just were in uncomfortable to you? We just move the scene forward, end it, and move on. So those are the ones that I use. And then last I'll say is that, you know, again, I wrote a game, Action 12 Cinema. It's all about movies. So I also use a lot of movie language, like this game will generally be PG-13. Most people are going to have a pretty good idea of what that might mean. And then I can use lines and veils and the X card to kind of like solidify that. But hey, we're going to play an NC-17 game, or we're going to play a PG-13 game. Again, I'd say like 80% of the people, especially in like the US, are going to go, oh, I have a pretty good idea of what we're in for there, but let's still have a little conversation about the specifics.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's important to have some shorthand with it and be clear, but to always have at least the basics of the conversation and be willing to go deeper if it's required. You know, when you mentioned some tools, whenever I have conversations about it, I always talk about this particular one. I'm going to see if I can get the camera to show it. It's not going to show it well, but I will simply say the safety tools that comes from the Modiphius Entertainment Star Trek Adventures Federation Klingon War Tactical Campaign. Fantastic book written by Al Spader, but the safety tools piece was put together by Allison Seib, a phenomenal content creator. One of my absolute favorite safety tool checklists. It is very Star Trek up in this situation, but I've used it at every game since this book came out a year or two ago. And it's because it is clear, it covers what needs to be covered, but it doesn't give you the laundry list. So I think it really avoids that. Now you're talking about the thing that triggers. It's there. And because it free available online through Modiphius and other places, you can get this exact checklist. It's one of those things that through Eventbrite, where most of the conventions I go to schedule through, as long as I have people signed up well in advance, I can actually send that out as an email to them well before the con and invite them to send it back to me well before the con. And for those who are there, I still hand out the physical paper or so that people know what's there. I also tend to hand out two note cards and one for something in game that I just need from everybody, your character name, whatever. And then the other would be in case there's something you don't feel comfortable saying at the table, hand it in with the rest of the cards. Nobody has to know. You're not even required to put your name on
Mhm.
to be honest. And then I can collect that information. I have it. Nobody's called out because of it, and we can go forward from there.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, we're playing these games because we want to have fun. And if someone at my table is uncomfortable, that's not fun. Yeah, again, we're dealing with like if you're playing a public game, you don't know who you're sitting down with. These may not be your friends forever, that you've known for a very long time. But I still a stranger. I don't want them to be upset either. But I also think there's some back and forth about you're going to a public game. You have to have at least some reasonableness about what the sort of things that you're going to deal with in your game. Just like, for example, like violence. If you play D&D, you're probably going to kill some goblins. I don't think it's reasonable to assume that like I'm going to play a pacifist, so no one else in the party is allowed to hurt another sentient creature in the game. I'm actually kind of a pacifist. I don't want to hurt anybody in real life, but in D&D, I kill goblins all the time because that's just, so I'm not saying the onus has to be on the DM for everything, but you also don't want to inadvertently hurt somebody. Same like if we're playing a game and there's a war happening, I know Michael knows in big picture, awful things happen in war, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean I want to have a scene where one individual child is harmed in some way, or one individual innocent family is being tortured by the evil warlord. Like that probably happens in wars. In D&D, it's probably happened on screen, but I don't want to look at it in the moment, right? So I just,
Yeah.
it's a game we're playing. We're all playing to have fun, but we're all adults, hopefully, at the table, or reasonable age. We know what we're doing. We're there for a reason. We're willing to work together so that everyone can have the most amount of fun possible.
I agree. I use lines and veils. That's one of my favorites to use, especially at conventions. I think that's perfect. I think, kind of going back to what you're talking about with descriptions of your games, I think if the GMs go into that kind of with the mindset of this is how this is the start of your session zero.
Mm-hmm.
Your description's going to set the tone for the game. Your description's going to already have all that in it. I think that is super important, like you said. I run a lot of Star Wars. Generally, I tell people it's PG. We can push PG-13. But anytime I run Shadow of the Demon Lord, I put in big letters, this is an adult game. 18 and over. This is a fantasy horror game that will contain elements of horror aspects, which includes gore, violence, and adult language. And I usually put in there, if this isn't what you're looking for in a game, thank you for reading my description. I'm not offended.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Because there are times
right
I
there.
want to play games like that. Like, sometimes I'm looking for that type of game and I want it to exist and I want to be able to find it because I don't want, again, like that, my Mork Borg situation, no one was at fault there, but if it had been a better description, then I probably wouldn't have went to that game and someone else who wanted that experience probably would have had a better time and I could have went and looked for another game. So I'm huge about those descriptions and how effective they should be and can be if you actually take the time to do them right. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And thank you to Blake, who's joining us again this evening. Blake is a gamer that sat at a couple of my tables 2 months ago or a month ago or so, recently at Rising Phoenix. So great to have you join us again, Blake. And he makes the comment that a fade to black moment is best or implied versus stated. And absolutely. And that's effectively in agreement with kind of what we've all been saying. I remember when I was younger, my mom loved James Bond movies. She loved movies in general. And I remember loving the kind of spy genre because I had watched reruns of The Avengers on TV. I'm talking Patrick and Diana Riggs. That Avengers, not the Marvel one, because I was not. That wasn't out when I was young.
Yeah.
That was out when I was significantly
Yes.
older. But I watched reruns of The Saint with Roger Moore. So I really, when I found out he was James Bond also, I was like, I got to see this.
Yeah.
There are some things that a 5 or 6 year old or a 7 year old should never watch in a James Bond movie, right? But there are a bunch of things that are perfectly fine if you're a relatively matured 5 or 6 year old. But distinctly remember there were times where the rule was if at any point in time I put my hands over your eyes, that's because I'm supposed to.
Yeah.
And I would have to just accept that. And, that's kind of the deal I had with my mom. It allowed me to watch things that I probably wouldn't be able to watch alone. And it gave me a really good idea of how to manage that in my life. And I kind of treat my games the same way. I'm not physically putting my hands over anybody's eyes, but that's the way I look at lines versus veils, right? And James Bond really does that anyway. You always get the curtains drawn and James, and that's the end of the scene, right?
Right.
There's nothing else that really comes of that. Some of the more brutal and explicit, torturous moments are rarely shown, and really until Daniel Craig's Casino Royale.
That was rough.
That was rough.
That was rough.
And the opening sequence during the credits for Die Another Day. No, not Die Another Day. The final Brosnan one. I can't remember it. In the Ice Palace or whatever, where they showed him being tortured in a Korean prison. But it was all done, no sound, and it was in the opening credit scenes where you saw that these things were happening. So again, fairly well veiled, generally speaking, and I like that concept with games when I want that. But there are times where, we wanted to play Alien. And Josh said, this is going to be all out. I'm a fraidy cat when it comes to horror movies. I really am. I'm not good at them. And I knew that going in. But I love the Alien movies, and I wanted the experience. So I was willing to push my own personal boundaries because I wanted that experience. Josh is like, okay, because we're doing a VTT. Lights are out, and we're doing the things. And he had sound effects up. Boy, howdy. I had a good 3 days of no sleep. But... And if you go back, and you can go back in our show and watch and listen to those episodes, you can see the points where I kind of freaked. But I can tell you, one, it was very clear, very in the opening. It's nothing happened that I wasn't okay with. And during some of the breaks that were semi-edited out, Josh did check in. Like, even if it was on the site, hey, you good? I'm good. And those types of things are important.
Yeah.
Just important, because everybody wants to have fun. But again, I wanted that experience. Right. I wanted to live the character in an Aliens movie. And honestly, best, absolute best, one of the best one shots I've ever been a part of, because I really got into the moment. And I was able to do that feeling safe because I knew I had a good friend that was watching my back.
So I do want to touch on that, but I think Chris was trying to get to something else, and I think we talked over him. So were you?
I'm sorry.
No. I mean, that's part of that's how it works, but I just want to make sure I gave him time there.
Well, I was actually going to kind of move my way into kind of what you started talking about, which was checking in. I do think that's important to check in. But one thing I really learned at this LARP was there's ways to check in with your players in the moment of a very intense scene. And it was super simple, and I wish I would have thought of it, because there are times where I've been at a table doing a very intense role-playing moment, and I've just let it go. There are times where letting it go has led to somebody being like, okay, stop, like too much. Can we take a break, tone it down, which I'm fine doing, but I wish I could have figured that out in the moment, so that way it didn't get to that point. And in the LARP, I mean, it's all live action. They said it, you can get as intense as you're comfortable with in a scene. If it's starting to get tense, hold up just the little okay symbol. The other person just responds with a simple thumbs up, which means I'm good. Thumbs up, which means we're getting too far. Or if you just do 2 thumbs up, basically that means let's ramp it up even further. I'm loving this. Or basically 2 thumbs down is we're done with the scene, which I think you could do at a table. Same concept, maybe not use okay, but whatever you want to do to check in so that way as a GM. I know with you two, I could do some very intense scenes and we'd be fine with it.
Yep.
Not like I'm going to reach across the table and slap one of you, which,
I might be into that.
Yeah. Might discover something new about ourselves.
Exactly.
Change our relationship.
It depends. So am I getting the steak and garlic bread first or after?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because what I do for steak and garlic bread, it can get a little weird. I love that. So when I LARPed, we had what we called the out of game symbol. So you hold up the O over your shoulder, and it had to be fair. And that means I'm going to talk out of game or out of character or what have you. And we tended to use that in a very similar fashion to what you're describing, where it's like, hey, I'm checking in. But I like that better because if you're going like, okay, now you're asking a question versus I'm about to do something separate. And so it's almost like a better an evolution of the original concept, right? Because this is not part of the scene; it's meta to the scene, but it's important and attention needs to be drawn. So this is showing I'm asking, and then the response 1, 2, 1, 2 down, whatever is that response. So you get that ask and response, and then you can move forward accordingly. And I think that's brilliant and absolutely can be done. Some of the live things like if you're doing dread or how to host a murder mystery kind of thing, or any of the live action role playing that you might do, or even if you're playing what's the name of that game that I played the other day? I can't think of it now, but it might be The Quiet Year. I think it was The Quiet Year, but it doesn't matter what you're doing. You have the ability to do this kind of meta thing to find out if everybody's good.
So one thing I was going to circle back to about what Lewanika was saying is I don't want to minimize. I think there is a personal responsibility each person at the table has for their own well-being. Because I want to be kind to the people at my table. I'm also going to be paying attention whether I'm a DM or player, like trying to they seem to be cool or they seem to be freaking out. But there is a personal responsibility to say, like Lewanika, what made me think about it is like you wanted an experience that you knew would be difficult for you. You made the choice to say, I'm going to try to do this, but then you also had the responsibility to be like, you know what? Actually, I need to back out now. Like I've tried. But no, if it had got to the point to say like, I need to go, you guys can keep playing, but I need to take a step out here as well. So I just want to make sure we at least touch base on that. There is still your responsibility to take care of yourself to the best that you can. But it all comes down to communication. It all comes down to communication. And like Chris said, like was kind of insinuating, I think there is a part of the game. Okay. For me personally, I enjoy the game more when we do more role play than we do like rolling the dice. But rolling the dice is part of the game. And I'm never going to be upset again if there's a person who's not very confident or they stutter or whatever the case may be, but they want to be the bard that is suave, then absolutely play that bard and roll the dice. And if you roll well, then you get to be the thing that you want to be. I have absolutely no problem with that. But I'm going to have more fun in a game where someone who is actually pretty suave is just role playing and we're all just like in the moment. So I get there is an element of that's like what I want to aspire to. And sometimes it can feel like a cheat to sort of like step out of that game and like have those conversations. But it's a game about communication, and anytime there's a disruption, it causes problems. I've mentioned this years and years ago. It was pretty famous on the RPG Academy. When Evan and I first started role playing together, we had this moment. It became super awkward. He got kind of upset. It wasn't intentional on my part, but again, it was a miscommunication. He was playing a character, and I was playing a female character who was like hitting on him because she wanted to convey information to him in private. And she was trying to get them alone. And so she was trying to play it off like, oh, we're going to have this dalliance. Once we get into the bedroom, I can share with you the secret information, right? But he didn't know that. And it just got really awkward because I didn't say that to him. I didn't say, oh, you get the feeling that she's once, she's like trying to get you alone. I was just role playing this character who was flirting with him, and he was role playing back. And then we got into the scene where we're in the room together, and I thought we were having fun role playing. So I didn't just immediately go, okay, now that we're alone, here's what she tells you. And he's like, are we going to role play this out? I'm like, well, kinda, but I was not thinking the same thing he was thinking. So communication is super important. And sometimes it's okay to be like, you know what? We're going to talk about what's going on in this scene, and then we can get back into the role play. And every time I start talking about safety tools, I remember that moment with Evan where he thought we were about to have like role play.
Yeah. I think that when you mention the personal responsibility, that's a very key point. And not only is there a responsibility for me, for myself, but as a player, even when I'm sitting at a table, I don't see whatever cards or whatever information is handed to the GM.
Sure.
But if I recognize somebody else is uncomfortable, there are times where I'll call for a break, even though I don't actually need one.
Yes.
Because to give somebody else either that moment away or that opportunity for them to take that responsibility for themselves so that they don't feel called out. And then coming back from that break, and this is especially true in a convention situation, I might pull the GM aside when nobody's around. It's like, hey, I don't want to call anybody out. Please don't call big attention to it. But I noticed somebody else, they look like they might be feeling some kind of way. That may be something you want to address, or maybe we might not want to hit the topic X as hard. I'm like, that's just my observance. If I notice it, and maybe I don't always notice it, nobody's perfect, right? Sure. I consider it my responsibility when I am running a game to be sure I do that. Mm-hmm. So I tend to notice it more then. But there's times when I'm a player, I might just be totally into it. Like maybe if I get to a convention and myself and my son are sitting at the table together, because we don't get to game together all the time anymore, I might just be into our banter, and I may not notice all the other things that are going on as deeply. But if I do notice it, then it comes down, I feel personally, that it is my responsibility. Once I notice, see a problem, do something about that problem. I can't just pretend, well, I'm not running the game, so who cares? Because our community is built by more people having fun at tables, not less.
Right.
So,
yeah. So back to Chris's point though, about the LARP, specifically with basically, are you okay? Yeah, I'm good. This is great. Or bring it down. I mean, there's nothing to keep us from adopting that at the role play table, but is there a different version of that? I mean, I see like in a LARP, when you're up moving around, you're probably moving your hands. It probably would be less like distracting, where at a gaming table, I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just curious. Have you thought about, is there a similar version of that you think would be more effective at an RPG table, or maybe even like on a Zoom call when we play the internet quite a lot? So have you thought about that, or do you have any opinions on that?
I have, and I've only thought about conventions. I didn't think about doing Zoom. It was something simple. Like my first thought was just like, almost like traffic cones, a green traffic cone and a little red traffic cone. You just slide it forward if you're enjoying the scene, and if you're not, you slide the red one forward. So, and I mean, you could have your hand on it, so it's not quite as visible of, hey, you doing this or anything. That was really my first thought with that. Or, I mean, I'm okay doing things like this, but
yeah,
a lot of times when I'm running a game at a convention, I'm kind of chilled out in a chair, or I get up a little bit more to add a little more emotion to the scene. It just kind of depends upon where I'm at. So I'm okay with that. Usually I just ask people, are you good with that? But I realize that breaks the character for a moment, and then it's harder for some people to get back into that.
Yeah.
And I thought this was just a neat way of keeping yourself in character and continuing that scene going.
Yeah, that was kind of my thought. Is there a way to do it so it's a little more seamless at the table? But I mean, again, communication, session 0 at the top, just like, hey, this is going to be a very intense game. There could be some very intense role play back and forth between characters. There could be some intense horror elements. So at any time, if you're, not feeling it, this is how you let me know. And it's not necessarily like an X card, like the scene is over, as much as it is like pump the brakes kind of a situation. My thought is the game master, I feel like I do that some, and again, to Lena's point, not perfect. I'm sure I've missed things. With Evan, I clearly did. But I feel like there's like people are leaning in to the scene, or if they're leaning away, like there's like some body posture and language. I might be able to go, oh, they're enjoying this scene versus they're not enjoying this scene. But especially if I'm one of the people like me and Lewanika, we're role playing this really intense moment. I'm not going to be focused on the other 3 or 4 people at the table. And they may be like, oh, this makes me uncomfortable. And I can't really focus on them because I'm focused on Lewanika. So I do like the idea of some physical action that is don't stop necessarily. Like that's obviously, X card, timeout, like this scene's over, but a way for ease it back a little. I don't want to ruin the scene. I don't want to stop the scene, but I don't want it to escalate either. And I'm sure there's different, potatoes, thumbs, we could figure that out. Now's not the time, but I do like that as a concept. I think I want to put some thought into that.
Yeah, I would be interested for that. I'm a pretty gregarious GM, and I speak with my hands consistently.
Yeah, me too.
And so for me, since I do that anyway, that seems to be the easiest for me to do. When I'm here on the podcast, this is really the longest time I try to sit down. I have a terrible back from years of physical abuse on the football field, the soccer field, and baseball and everything else. So I don't like to sit down when I GM. I tend to stand. It's only when I'm doing VTT that I do that, and that's more for mic discipline and camera placement more than anything else. When I'm at convention, I'm pretty much consistently standing up. And there's a couple of reasons for it. I'm a vet who has terrible hearing thanks to years of service. And one of the things that I have to do is lean in order to be able to hear and converse with folks, especially at those awful round tables that are so wide, but even though they're short, like it's harder for me to hear across them. And if I'm in a crowded space, conventions that have a lot of smaller rooms where there might only be 3 or 4 tables in a room, I do better at than the bigger areas where I'm in a room with like 30 tables. Even if I'm fairly spread out, there's just a lot of noise echoing, and it's hard for me. So I have to stand up in order to kind of keep my focus where it needs to be. So in some of those situations where it gets really loud, those physical things would probably help me as well. So, for the audience out there, if you have some physical things that you can think of, let us know. Put them in the comments now, later, whenever. Give us a heads up. Let us know kind of what you use to kind of bridge these gaps.
And I'm not interested in like, horror stories like haha, but if something went bad, that can also be experienced. So if you saw something that didn't go well that you would be willing to share, I don't need names or specifics, but something that we could learn from a failure, that would be interesting to hear as well. Chris?
Well, somebody just said something in chat that I really like. It says if they saw somebody signal to tone it down, they might end the scene from embarrassment at making somebody feel uncomfortable. That being a person like I am, I've GM'd for years. I still get nervous. I go to set up my table 15 minutes before the game starts at a convention. I'm nervous for some reason. And it could be a module I've run 10 times. I'm still nervous because I want everybody to walk away having a great time. So I understand what you're saying with, you might feel embarrassed by it. I think having something like you were just talking about, that kind of the signals or something that kind of, tone it down, can kind of help alleviate both the GM's embarrassment and the players, and not have that happen as much. I kind of like the idea of the cones, but it wasn't something I fleshed out. I'd want to play around with it. I liked that kind of thing because, Michael, you and I could be in a very intense scene. We could be yelling at each other, not realizing that we've said something that's now upset Lewanika.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So by having signals like that, it would give him the ability to go, hey, can you guys tone back from the whole, whatever the situation is, but maybe we're arguing because we're super tall, and, not everybody in the world is super tall. And he's like, hey, I don't, I'm kind of a short guy. I know I'm picking the obvious thing that anybody that knows us, but That way it would give the other players also a chance to say, hey, can we tone the scene down a little bit, but not break the scene either? Because I'm a player that loves watching those intense scenes. And I'll sit there and watch back and forth and let you guys role play for an hour, and I'll just sit there watching. Like that's fun for me. Other people probably want to interject themselves, but if you guys hit something I wasn't super comfortable with, it'd be nice for me to be able to, hey, can you guys tone that aspect of that conversation down?
Yeah.
So that's why I kind of like the idea of everybody having some sort of signals.
I, I'm in a virtual game it's a home game that a good friend runs, and uh, uh, you know, our group has known each other for years. Like two of them I've known since I was, Glenn actually runs that home game, and so I've known Glenn since I was like 13 years old. Marty's in that game. I've known since I was 13. One of Glenn's children plays, his wife plays, good friends that I've known for 5, 6 years play in this game as well. So we all know each other fairly well. One of the players, Marty and I, we play brothers, and we take that all the way to the limit. Like we will argue with each other and do the whole back and forth, but we are also cognizant of everybody else's lines and veils. So we do check in with each other or other folks kind of in the side chat, that goes on. Hey, everybody good with this? Even though it's a home game, we're not doing this for air, but we still make sure that we have not taken anything too far. We're constantly checking in, checking back. And I think that's just good courtesy to fellow gamers. You always got to check back.
I mean, I think all of it just comes down to the type of people who care about this are the type of people who are going to be aware, and not to say we won't mess up, but we're going to be cognizant and paying attention and hopefully catch things before they get to the point where someone like really is upset, triggered, has to walk away from the table, or, that type of thing. I've heard some stories of like people having panic attacks at tables, just because, again, it's something that, without getting specific, something happened at the table that was triggering, but it wouldn't have been like an obvious, like, oh, we're talking about this is terrible. Like no one should listen to this, but it's just something like, oh, they had something happen in their life and this is just too similar of like a plot point. So no one was at fault. No one was going to expect that to be the thing, but people are weird. Brains are weird. Sometimes we just, especially at conventions, like on the third day when I've had like 4 hours of sleep and I'm running on 5-hour energies and, Pop-Tarts, there's a whole lot of things that can go that might cause me to have a different reaction. So again, I don't want to overstate it. I don't want to minimize it, but just be aware. And especially if you're playing or running games in conventions, do what you can to set yourself up for success with good descriptions, reading those descriptions to make sure you know what you're signing up for, asking questions where appropriate, and just watching out for yourself and everybody else the best you can. There may not be a hand signal before the game starts, but it doesn't say you can't start one. If things are getting really intense, you could just be like, just hold up your hand, like, sort of the universal symbol for, hey, this is getting a little high. You might be able to work something out in the moment if you're paying attention.
Absolutely. Like you said, description at the beginning to get everybody going, to let people know what they're in for is helpful. Working that out and rolling with what the table's doing, because there are times where I could set up. I want this to be an intense action adventure, but you're in that 11 o'clock slot on a Saturday on a 4 or 5 day con, and everybody's a bit punchy.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody did go for the dinner break. They probably had a liquid dessert.
Yep.
And we're all doing at least 2 or 3 more Monty Python jokes than probably one would expect. Maybe that level of intensity just isn't coming through at this point, and maybe you need to kind of just accept that and not try to make it something that it's not going to be. There's some art to that. And it is not a science. You just have to feel what's going on around you, and know what's there. And kind of like setting your description is important. Honestly, picking the time slots for the games that you run. I'm gonna do a super horror filled game with all of the bells and whistles. I'm not doing that in the 8 o'clock in the morning time slot.
No,
it's not. It's not gonna work the way I want it to. I don't. It's just not.
Yeah.
One, I don't like running the 8 o'clock time slot. I do it when I have to, but it's not my best time slot, right?
Yeah.
So run that game at a good time slot that works. If maybe that's the later night, so you can get that intensity's there. But maybe you don't want people that punchy, so maybe you run that in that afternoon to early evening session before the dinner break. Maybe that's the time to do that game.
Yeah.
Again, more art than science, but if you run a lot of games at a lot of conventions, you'll start to sense
There are
that.
patterns.
Even if you don't,
yeah,
yeah,
you'll start to see that.
even if you don't run a lot of games, just by going to a lot of conventions and playing in a lot of games, you'll start to see, oh, Alien usually doesn't run at 8 in the morning, but it's pretty consistently running at that 7 o'clock at night time slot or in that 4 in the afternoon time slot. Kind of pay attention and see those things and understand them for what they are.
I'll say
there's a reason why it happens.
For me, we had Gen Con signups a couple weeks ago, and I have a very involved process for how I pick my games. But one of the first things I do is filter out any game that starts before 9 because I'm not going to be there. There's no point in me signing up for an 8 o'clock game. I'm not going to show up. So I will leave those tickets for the people who will get up at 8 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, 8 o'clock games now. All right.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I struggle.
Yeah.
I struggle with them.
Anything else in chat we want to touch on? Otherwise, I think we can get close to wrapping things up. Oh,
yeah.
Blake threw out an idea of kind of red light, red, yellow, green light, like a stoplight.
Yeah.
I mean, he used Soling spindles, but I get the idea of green means I'm really enjoying it. Yellow, slow down. Red means let's stop. Like that's a good way of doing it too. I was trying to play around with an idea of like a needle is what I was trying to do in my head.
Yeah.
A meter, but I'm like, who's going to want to sit there and turn a meter? And I don't know.
Yeah.
That just didn't work in my head as well, but I kind of like the idea of the red, yellow, green lights.
I think too, just again, trying to think about the dice at the table, you could like D20, if you push the D20 forward, go, pull it back, slow down, D4, no, just like use the different dice size or type as like as a way. But again, that's all something you have to say ahead of time, and people might mess up and forget. And like, well, what's a D12 for? D12's perfect. So I don't know. But you've got me thinking here. I will put some thought into that. Because I like the idea of a way in the scene without ending the scene to like, yes, I love this, or pull it back. More pull it back. Because I think, yes, I love it I think you could get that from me easily, like in my face or my actions. But if I'm like an observer and I'm getting uncomfortable, like, is there a way for me to let you know to tone it down? Because I don't want to end the scene, but I think to Blake's point, it's probably going to. Like if I try to put the brakes on, it probably will stop. Just human nature sort of a thing. It's like, type of thing. But it's not a perfect world.
Part of the reason I like using some sort of signal, I know sometimes if I'm doing a pretty intense scene, let's say again, it's just me and you in the scene. As a GM, I will get tunnel vision and focus on you. So if there's some sort of symbol or signal that can go on that'll catch my vision, hold on, Lewanika just pushed out the yellow symbol. I'll stick with that. That tells me to back off from that. I may not necessarily be reading everybody else's faces and their body language if I'm in an intense scene with you. So that's why I liked the different hand signals they were doing. Because it could be, even if you were just, you may not be the main actors in that scene with the LARP, but if you're there, it would tell everybody to tone it down. And like the last LARP I went to, we had some very emotional scenes. And I mean, I don't even know how to explain it. It was such a crazy decisions we made, and they were not good decisions, but literally there were characters who were crying. And there were a couple times I looked at them and was like, hey, real quick, how you doing? And the players were like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I love it. I'm like, okay, as long as those tears are in character and they don't bleed over to real life at all, that's what I want to check in on you with. And, after those scenes were done too, I checked in as well. And it's like, hey, Duncan's okay. How's Matt doing? Mm-hmm. Oh, Matt's fine. Duncan's a wreck. Perfect. Yeah. As long as Matt's good, that's all I'm really worried about right now.
Yeah. And we haven't really touched
Duncan can be a wreck.
We haven't really touched on that, but bleed is a thing too. Like you might enjoy the scene. You might have been loving the scene, but when it's over, those are some real emotions that you were dealing with that now your person might have to deal with. But again, that may be a whole other episode, and I'm not clinically
Yeah.
qualified to talk about it too much, other than I know that it exists, and I have my own ways
Yeah.
of dealing with it if it comes up.
Yeah, there's a whole topic that we may get to at some point in the future where we talk about building a character that is an aspect of yourself, and therefore some of the emotions that that character goes through, you're kind of going through as well in order to portray that. I don't think my guess is nobody on the podcast here is a method actor a la De Niro or others, but I do think there are elements of method acting that goes into role playing the kinds of characters that we play. So it is definitely there have been times where I have kind of taken a little bit more out of the game than I probably wanted to, and I pay attention to those types of situations now. One thing before we wrap up, I will mention is, and this is again kind of taking care of the community and taking care of friends who are close. I have a very good friend. I'm not going to call them out specifically and get into too many details because I don't think it's not my story to tell. But there's a specific type of physical attack that can happen in role playing games that is very bothersome to them. And it is very important that that doesn't take place in games. And if I'm at a table, I don't always know if that's something they will put on their card. But if I'm at a table with them there, I will put it on my card
Mm.
because whether I know that's an issue, and I have been in situations where they have dealt with it and then had to deal with it. So I do my best to not have that happen. So if there's something I would say as a non-clinical person who doesn't have any degrees or any ability to say much, I would say one of the toughest things as people we can ever do is advocate for our own well-being in social situations. So I hope if you are hearing this and that's an issue for you, you take some solace in the fact that you're not alone and take some strength in the fact that it's okay to advocate for yourself.
Oh yeah.
Feel free to do that. And if you are the friend, loved one, or sitting at a table where somebody might not do that, don't do it in a way that calls them out. Don't do it for the purposes of being a hero, but doing it just to be a good person and help somebody out when they are not necessarily able to do that on their own. If you can do that in that quiet way that accomplishes the task, please do. That's how we make other people's lives a little bit better. That's how we make our games more fun and more inclusive and better.
Yep. Take care of each other.
When you said that, it popped in my head. That is something I do as a GM. I think about a lot of my descriptions, especially in combat. How am I going to explain this so it won't affect somebody in a negative way? It sometimes hurts me because then my descriptions are, oh, you shoot the bad guy, he falls over dead, versus being a little more descriptive with how that character or that bad guy fell over. Part of that is just because I'm trying to think about, oh, maybe somebody doesn't want blood splurting all over the place or a graphic description. So sometimes I will short myself or possibly short the table, I should say, on that description because I'm constantly thinking about how do I make sure everybody here is having a good time? And how do I not hit anything? But I do that in the storyline too. It's easy for me to do that with Star Wars. I mean, you're playing an alien race fighting the bad guy, which is usually the Empire or the Separatists, depending upon which time frame I'm in. So that's an easy one for me to do because it's droids. You're killing some droids. You shoot its leg off. Nobody's worried about killing a droid that's evil. So a little more difficult when you get to Shadow of the Demon Lord because that is a fantasy horror setting that
leans into
is
the horror.
designed. Yeah, and it is designed to push some of that. But I'm still thinking about, okay, how far do I push it? And that's where I just do a lot of checking in. So it's just interesting you mentioned thinking about other people. And that's one thing I know I do sometimes overthink it to a point where I think I short the description a little bit. So if you're ever at one of my tables and you see me doing that, tell me, hey, stop doing it.
Yeah.
Fire away. I'm comfortable with hearing, how the droid exploded into a million pieces and caused other things to happen. So
Yeah, at my D&D tables, doesn't come up with Star Trek too often because that's pretty well set in canon as far as I'm mirroring show X or Y.
Hmm.
So
Mhm.
that tells me where my descriptions need to go. But if I am doing D&D, when we sit down, my description will cover whatever the general area is, but then when I sit down, I will actually look at the table and ask the question. I can at times get very graphic with some of my combat violent descriptions. I'm never going to cross the lines of any of the lines, and I will generally not go near the veils. But you know, there are times where viscera comes up or what have you in some form. Is everybody okay with that? And if not, please put that on your card. I'll let me know, and I'll adjust my tone accordingly. And so I actually have that specific conversation because I love cinematographic descriptions of combat and combat results. So, but I can do that as graphic as, say, Conan film, or as comical and comic booky as, say, a Kill Bill, or I can bring it to maybe a Die Hard where it's kind of real but not terribly in your face. There's different avenues. Like you can go to a whole bunch of different levels. It could be like Highlander. There's some violent things that are happening, but it's pretty straightforward action stock
Hmm.
in Highlander. So I have that conversation, so I know where to move the needle that I'm using in my description.
Oh. All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Anyone watching now or in the future, thank you for being here. Again, please share with us any thoughts you have, any good or bad examples that you've seen out in the wild. And go to conventions, play games with other people, and be kind to each other. Lewanika, how would you like to sign off tonight, sir?
I would just like to say thanks again for joining us here at Tabletop Journeys and Tabletop Cafe. I love joining the fellows here and talking gaming and gaming community. It's great stuff. Please, by all means, pay attention to what we've got going on here on the channel. Our regular episodes are Fridays. Our actual place for Star Trek Adventures RPG are on Tuesdays. Tabletop Cafe every other week on Wednesdays. For those that are Spotify listeners, we're going to start airing some of the older episodes of Tabletop Cafe on Spotify. I'll be dropping those on Wednesday mornings starting next week. And we'll do
Nice.
those in order. And we may even have a bonus one in there for you that was kind of recorded and not aired at one point. So we'll try to spice it up a little bit. And by all means, for those who are interested in deeper dives on these and other topics, joining us for games, please, please, please feel free to join us on our Discord. Feel free to join us on our Patreon and our Facebook group. We'd love to have you. We have monthly games for our patrons. We are running Star Trek. We are getting ready to run a couple other games here in the very near future. Some of our fellow audience members are actually have offered to run some games through our Discord
Yeah, I'm
community as
playing a
well.
one
So
shot of Deadlands next week, just for funsies.
yes. Yeah, just for funsies. So reach out if that's something you want to do. And if you are so interested in Star Trek, I'll be posting when we're done tonight, the next date for Star Trek. So we have some seats that'll be available at that table virtually as well. So look forward to it.
Very cool. Thank you, Chris.
I get to play around on some Discord stuff. That's about it. I don't do a ton of other social media. You can catch me doing the Redemption. Well, it's now Smuggler's Blues, the continuation of the Redemption story that we're doing. We switched to Thursdays now, not Tuesdays. Just scheduling worked out better to do Thursdays. So, not the weeks we record this show, but next week we'll be doing the next one for that. I like to kind of give my weeks a little bit of. So for a while, I was doing them 3 days a week,
Yeah.
every other week, and I was like, oh, that's just
too
killing
much.
me too. So, yeah. So, that's really, you can see me there. A Catacon for sure. I'll be there. Probably do some other little conventions here and there. We got the faculty retreat in the fall coming up. That's going to be a lot of fun. And Blake, you keep making comments, which are awesome. Thank you very much. If you get a chance, come to a Catacon. I think I know a guy or two that might buy you a beverage for hanging out with us. Yeah. I said a guy or two.
Yeah.
I don't want to
Yeah,
point
yeah.
fingers or volunteer your paycheck.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not the whole paycheck. Maybe just a little
Yeah.
of it.
I'm hoping I catch Blake up at Open Gaming Con in July because I'll be up there. I've already got one of my Star Trek games running there. That'll be in I believe that's Marlborough, Massachusetts, but
Oh,
it's
nice.
in the 495 corridor. So you know, Blake, gather up the crew. You know, the Hedy Lamar needs to fly again, my friend.
It's Headley. And again, basically, I'm on Discord. So that's really the only place I'm active. I have Facebook groups for like a catacomb, but I really don't post a whole lot there. But a catacomb, speaking of it, badges go on sale June 7th. That is for VIP and vendor applications only. Everything else will go live in August. The actual date of our event is in November 7th, 8th, and 9th. I will be at Origins in June. I will be at Gen Con in July / into August. Probably be Lexicon, Sensicon, all the ones around Cincinnati. I try to hit all those up. And I'm always wanting to get into one shots, either run them or play in them. So if you join the Discord and you offer a game, I'll try to work my way into it. And then where can people email this show, Lewanika? What's the email for the T2J?
And that would be. You would hit me up.
Sorry.
I actually know it. It is. Yeah. Oh, Josh is going to kill me. This is why he
Is it
does the hardware
ttjourneys
thing.
at Gmail?
It is.
Ah.
It is ttjourneys@gmail.com for our email address. And our website is t tabletopjourneys.com, I think.
I don't know.
Give me a second.
Why you looked up.
Let me
So
grab
if
my
you have
card.
any comments about this show that you want to email, or Tabletop Journeys in general, or ask questions about any of us individually, you can use that email to get a hold of us. And we'll give Lewanika about 5 more seconds to figure that out before I cut him off.
I dropped my card.
Oh no!
Yeah, there it is.
Uh-oh. No.
I have this really cool case where I keep all my cards and Tabletop Journey stickers. See, nice. So nice little.
It is ttjourneys.com.
Yes.
I got there.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Well, that we will sign off. Thanks everybody. We'll see you in a couple.